Okay, Adam, I made a benchmark for the first time in about 15 years.
You made a serious benchmark for serious people, for sure.
Yeah, it's we were doing a video for Falcon Northwest about making a PC, like a PC for games, and I realized that there's not any real like game dev like light bake benchmarks or compile benchmarks and stuff like that. So I loaded up UE5 and built a little like a, I don't want to call it, it's not like a full real life run for a light bake because that takes a kind of long time to run for a real production level. But I made something that I think is fairly representative of what a light bake looks like if you on a production video game, on a video game.
Yeah, well, and to be fair, it's way more than I know about any of that game development stuff. I know hardware, so it was interesting to see hardware used in a different way. If people want to see the video, it's up on PC World's YouTube channel now. Sponsored by Falcon Northwest. Thank you. It was one of those perfect testing kind of scenarios where Falcon Northwest was like, hey, we'd love somebody to test this game dev stuff on hardware. We don't have anybody in house who knows game dev stuff, but we're like, hey, Will, you know this stuff.
I was available. It turns out
you were available. It worked out perfect. It was a match made in heaven. But yeah, specifically for Unreal Engine 5, right?
Yeah, so the thing, so we had two benchmarks that we used. One is a map compile for the Anacrusis, which Chet was kind enough to let us use, which uses the tool chain that we built for the game, which includes like GPU light bakes. So instead of doing those math calculations on the CPU, like you would in the old days, or if you're really serious about fidelity, we used a light mass plugin that was GPU accelerated on the Anacrusis, so that like we could do light bakes on all of the artist computers. That was the choice we made over there. They made that choice before I started, for what it's worth. The thing that we did with UE5, because I talk about it a little bit in the video, but I think a lot of people think, oh, you don't need to do light bakes or anything like that anymore because people have ray tracing hardware that can do real-time lighting and all this crazy stuff. And while that's true at like the high end of the PC, it's a little bit less true the further down the hardware, like the platforms you get. So like when you're talking about like an Xbox Series X or a PS5, yeah, you can do some dynamic lighting stuff, but there's still probably some light bakes in there for even like the high end hardware. When you're talking about something that's running on a Switch or like an old GeForce 1080 or 2080 computer, like there's light map city up in there. So like you still have to do that math, and it takes a long time, it turns out, because you're basically like bouncing light from every light source to every surface in the game and figuring out whether it should be light or dark based on how far it is from the thing. And that's computationally expensive.
Well, and excuse my limited knowledge for this kind of stuff, but this is something that happens. It sounds like it happens at different points in the process of game development. You're like baking occasionally to just see how things happen. And then, of course, you're doing like the final bake before it goes live. Is that right?
Well, yeah. So there's like everybody's process is different on this stuff. So like some studios will gray box out an entire level and it'll just be like flat shaded generic boxes that are like to see how it plays.
So
right?
They'll build the content, the actual gameplay, and then worry about the lighting and stuff later.
Yeah. So like if you look at I think Half-Life, this is the way Valve worked for old Half-Life games. This is the way Bungie did it, the old Halo games, is they would gray box out the level and build those arenas so that the combat arena was fun. And then somebody would come through and say, okay, this big giant box is going to be a big rock, and this big giant box is going to be a blah, blah, blah. And like, obviously this is an oversimplification, because if you're talking about a game that has like a big set piece level, then they're going to know what that set piece is coming in. So if like they know that like the Call of Duty Stalingrad level where you grab you're chained to the guy, you grab the gun, he gets the second clip of ammo. Like they know you're going to run up a big hill. They know you're going to start at a boat dock, and they know that the end of that is going to be charging some giant library or like Stalingrad, like a civic building, right?
Classic.
Yeah, but like if you're just running through corridors and stuff like that, then yeah, often they start gray box, and those will be full light. So there's no lighting calculations. It's just everything is lit. There's no shadows. There's no dark spaces. And then as the levels get arted up, as the environment artists come in and like turn the boxes into chairs and tables and bushes and shrubbery and cover and all that stuff, then you start placing lights along with that process, right? And those lights determine what areas are light and which areas are dark, and that's when you start to need to bake those those light maps.
And that's very computational intensive, which is why the hardware matters going into that. And that's what your benchmark was trying to get at, right? Was like, hey, what are the specific hardware requirements for doing that specific kind of task, right?
Yeah, baking the light maps specifically is a thing that includes a lot of downtime. So it's often like hit the button and walk away and go have lunch, or maybe go have lunch and then have a walk and then come back. And that means that artist can't do anything else during that time. Now, there are a bunch of ways around it. You can build a really fast machine. Like our main environment artist had a giant Threadripper for the early development process when they were doing this all in the CPU. And he ended up doing most of the early light bakes because he had the big giant CPU. We switched to the GPU light maps so that everybody could do it as we got further along and had more environment artists working, and it made a lot of sense. And, it's the other thing you can do is set up a dedicated workstation someplace that's just the light bake machine, and you check in your updates, and then you run a script that says, hey, download the latest updates, and then it'll bake the lights on the following maps, and it'll just do those sequentially and then upload them back to your Perforce or GitHub or whatever you use for code management and asset management.
Well, I found the video very enlightening as not a game developer, so hopefully game developers will find it enlightening. I will say, as of today, when we're recording this, the video is up on PC World's YouTube channel, and we do have some developers in our Full Nerd Discord who are literally talking right now in a background window that I'm seeing, and they're talking about the different use cases for different hardware. But specifically, one of them was asking about if that benchmark is going to be included in our future CPU reviews, because we at PC World like to review components like CPUs and GPUs, and we're always looking for new ways to benchmark and test and help people. And one of the questions I had was, this is something that you had created personally, which is indicative, you feel is indicative of a certain specific part of game development. But sometimes I do worry that this is not a benchmark that anyone could necessarily do on their own. A lot of times it's like, hey, anybody could go down and download Cinebench and compare scores. Oh, what is my score versus your score? It's open nature. But if this is something that was developed in-house, is that actually something beneficial to an end user?
So you can, on this one, you can, you have to be a registered Unreal developer, I think, to download UE 5.3.2, which is what I used for the benchmark. The assets that I used are all either assets that ship with the default, with their default UI, like their default package, or things that I had attained a license to by either clicking the, hey, this is free, or, just like Epic does for games that you download from the store. For game developers, they also do asset packs that are free all the time. And if you go through and I just mash those buttons every day. It's just a thing I do in the morning. And then you end up getting a lot of shrubbery and stuff like that. So the shrubs in the buildings were part of one of those packages. And I believe that we can distribute that. I'll have to double check, but Gordon has the benchmark and the instructions for running it. So you all are welcome to use it. It's your benchmark. I developed it for you all at this point.
Thank you. I guess for me though, it's the question we had somebody in our Discord ask, is this something I could download and run on my own so I can compare and contrast? They
could. They'd have to sign up to be an Unreal developer. So
okay.
Yeah, it's available. It's really, really intensely multi-threaded in a way that a lot of normal app software that you use isn't. It's up there with video encoding and raw photo processing and stuff like that.
Watch out, because it could burn down your house.
Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
And I'm Adam.
Yeah, Adam's here.
Yeah.
Adam Patrick Murray of PC World is joining us today. Brad is on assignment this week. So we are going to, we normally would do Q&A right now. And Adam is good at answering A's. I listened to him do A's answering on the Full Nerd this week, the PC World podcast.
Very nice.
But instead, I wanted to ask, like, we're coming out of Computex season. So Computex is a big PC trade show, PC specific trade show that happens at the end of spring every year in Taiwan. Adam, you've been for what, a bunch of years at this point, 4 or 5 years, 6 years?
Well, my first one was in 2019, and then during the pandemic years, they didn't have them. So I've only been to 3. I can't remember how many Gordon has been to, but it's a number of them for sure.
We when I was at Maximum PC, we never went to Computex because it was kind of expensive to travel to Taiwan.
Yeah, well, it's a long flight. Some people don't like the long flight either.
Yeah, like, look, our international travel budget at Maximum PC was like $4, which wouldn't get us there. So I think when I asked one year, our boss was like, yeah, if you can figure out a freighter you can stow away on, you're welcome to go. We'll pay for the hotel once you get there, but we're not paying for airplanes. But yeah, so like we've over the years, I think one of the things I loved about like the work that the Giant Bomb guys did and what we did at Tested and stuff like that was talking about, like, we talked about the tech that comes out of this on the PC World podcast. Brad and I have talked about it a little bit. It wasn't a huge consumer tech year in terms of like big announcements. Like we got a little bit of a hint about what's coming from the next Intel and AMD CPUs, but that stuff wasn't really ready. The Qualcomm Snapdragon Elite X SoC was announced and kind of released almost immediately thereafter, and it's fine. I don't know that we're going to do an episode about that over here. If you want to hear about it, we've talked about it on the Full Nerd a lot over the last couple of weeks.
Oh yes, Gordon has been diving in real deep. I know he's recording a video with his findings tomorrow, so I'm excited to see that. Yeah.
But yeah, like it's that, I think that stuff's interesting and it comes and goes. But the thing that I love to talk about too is that each trade show has kind of its own vibe, right?
Oh yeah, it really does.
CES, E3, like we've talked about both of those a lot. Norm and Joey and I went to NAB a couple of times. That was really fun and weird.
Oh yes.
Like NAB is the National Association of Broadcasters, where like Canon and Nikon and all the people who make studio cameras for like the Tonight Show and your local news sell their stuff. So we're walking in there and it's the same place that CES happens. I don't think we really appreciated this, but like they have demo booths set up that are like local news booths or like a sitcom booth. Yeah. So you can demo their production cameras live, and it was just super fun. It was a really fun, goofy thing to walk around and
they would
do.
Hire models to just sit in these scenarios too. The funny thing is, I used to review the cameras on smartphones years ago on one of our sister channels. I had a series called Last Cam Standing, which I like as a photographer, I would go real deep into the testing of smartphone cameras, which was real fun. I miss doing it, honestly. But a couple times we attended NAB as a company just to attend it, which was kind of cool to go to a trade show and not have to cover it. We were just there to experience it, which was cool. But I actually got to use a lot of those sets for my camera testing at the same time, which, hey, it worked out. It was perfect.
It's awesome. Like they had studio lights set up and they had outdoor lights set up. Like it was really like we went to that more or less as attendees rather than coverings. I think we made like 3 videos out of there, which was low for us. We went to the coffee convention, which was amazing because that was where like the best baristas in the world come to like show off the stuff that they're most awesome at, and like the espresso machine vendors and the brewed coffee. Like it was fun. It was a fun show that was like, during the day you drank a ton of coffee, and then at night everybody went to bars and drank a whole lot of booze because you had to kind of even it out through the like, or else your heart would explode on the third day. It was a good time.
Okay. Well, I guess, do you think people understand the difference between a trade show and like a convention? Because I think a lot of people have been to or have thought of like a San Diego Comic-Con or a TwitchCon or Anime Expo or, something like that versus a trade show, which, I mean, even some trade shows some are more business and some are more like actual like coming to look at announcements, like media coverage? Do you think people
like,
really know the difference?
Like, I don't, 20 years ago, I could have given you a really good definition about whether you were there to sell stuff and whether you were looking at buyers for big markets and stuff like that. And I think now they've kind of merged. Like, it depends on the market. Like NAB, definitely a trade show, right? Like,
yes,
people are there with their products. There's like guys with suits on, and they have a laptop that they can take your order on, or like it's an opportunity for you to engage with a sales department of a big giant company. E3, the last time I went to E3 felt like somewhat of a split between a con and a trade show, right? It was like,
for better or worse.
Yeah, but it was almost a giant press event more than, like, it's not like the Walmart buyer was walking around being like, okay, we're going to buy 30,000 units of Assassin's Creed this year. We're going to buy 10,000 units of Halo Infinite. We're, like that's what that used to be like. And I don't feel like that had happened at E3 in a really long time.
Yeah, well, and I've never been, but I've heard Gamescom like actually has separate days for trade versus public, which I thought is kind of interesting too.
That's what happened with E3 at the end too. Like the end of E3, the first couple of days were press and industry, and then the last couple of days were just like you'd buy a $50 ticket if you lived in LA and go. And Gamescom does work the same way.
Well, I can say so for Computex. I mean, Computex, it's all about the computer. A lot of computational stuff, but there are different levels in it from what I've seen. Like you have the consumer end, which is what we cover on PC World, but there is plenty of stuff for server grade and large AI kind of stuff. Like I would say in a lot of ways, a lot of those companies were focused on B2B kind of stuff, where we're there more for the consumer stuff. And Computex specifically, their last day is open to the public. So that's how they integrate some people. And the crowds were definitely different. You could feel the difference in the crowd, but it still wasn't quite like a public day at a convention or even E3. I went to one of the final E3s too, and yeah, it did not feel like that either. It still felt like mostly work. People there to do serious work.
Yeah, it's like for a trade show, the idea that there would be like a big mob like there is, if you've been to San Diego Comic-Con, that you can get into places on the show floor there that there's just so many people you can't move around, right? Like you can't, you just kind of have to get in the flow of traffic and walk with them. And there's a couple, like CS has a couple of bottlenecks that are like that pretty consistently, but for the most part, there's room to move around. You can go and you can talk to somebody at a booth. It's not just a massive crush of people all the time like there is at Comic-Con.
And Computex is the same kind of way. It was definitely crowded for sure, and it depended on what booth you were going into. But for the most part, we could navigate it, except for there was one specific time during the opening day where two people came through and security surrounded and just blocked the flow of traffic. It was like everything was like to a standstill, and it was very infuriating. Can you guess what those two people were? They weren't together. They were like one came through and then the next one came through. Was it
Jen Sun?
Yeah,
was one of them.
One of them was the CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang. The other one was the president of Taipei. So yeah, they actually came through, and like that, I had never seen anything like completely shut down like that before in the middle of a trade show with the spectacle and the security and everybody taking photos and all that kind of stuff. That was definitely a new experience for me at this Computex.
So it's funny. I feel like politicians used to come to Comdex, which was kind of the last North American computer trade show. That I think the last one of those was in 98 or 99, maybe 2000. It was early this millennium. It's so okay. So Computex is all about computers. I didn't realize that I thought it was all consumer stuff. I didn't realize that you were consumer and B2B. I didn't realize that there were like servers and data center stuff and all that kind of stuff there too.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's two, the actual Nangang convention center has two buildings, and then the main one has two floors. Usually the consumer stuff is on the top floor of one of the buildings, but the rest of it is B2B stuff. But even on the consumer floor, like there's a company like Asus who has a lot of B2B work, customers, but then also a lot of consumer grade. And not only did they have some of it separate, like Asus had a separate ROG booth for their gaming stuff versus their Asus proper stuff. But even in the Asus proper, they had like large data centers, with the latest NVIDIA workstation, server grade stuff in there, alongside their ProArt consumer based creation tools and things like that. So it was very integrated into it, even though we're there mostly for the consumer stuff.
So okay, so like it's at E3, your big booths are like your big publishers and your platforms. So it's like Sony and Microsoft and EA and like once upon a time Activision and Ubisoft and all those. At CES, it's CES is consumer electronics. So for a long time, it was Intel and Microsoft and Panasonic and Samsung and
LG usually has a pretty big booth.
LG and folks like that. And like they're selling everything from like washing machines and dryers and robot vacuums,
TVs,
like LG, to TVs and phones. What are the big booths at Computex?
So for the consumer stuff specifically, it kind of culminated on that second floor in the middle, and there was 4 major booths. 2 of them were Asus. Like I said, one of them was ROG. The other one was more Asus brand Asus. The other one was Gigabyte, and the last one was MSI. So that was kind of like the dead center of the floor. You could stand there right in the middle, and you're just like looking at these huge booths surrounding you. So those were the main 4 that were huge.
It's amazing to me that it's motherboard and video card companies. I mean, I guess Asus sells PCs as well, laptops as well. Does Gigabyte do PCs, or are they just components?
That is a good question. They do have laptops. They were showing off laptop stuff there. I can't remember if they do pre-builds or not. That's actually a good question, but mostly laptops.
Yeah. I mean, I think laptops
and monitors and all that kind of stuff. So I would say laptop was definitely a huge focus there. Obviously, there's the whole Snapdragon stuff. Intel announced Lunar Lake. AMD announced their new Ryzen AI 300 series. I mean, there was a lot of news, but yeah, the major vendors like Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA didn't really have booths there. They were partnered with certain booths. Like they definitely had presences there, and a lot of them were official keynotes of Computex. So their impact was very much felt. But yeah, it's not like you could walk up to an Intel booth and check out all their laptops, or an NVIDIA booth and check out all their, GPUs and things like that.
Well, it kind of makes less. It's conceptually interesting to me that there's like a booth for motherboard. Like I mean, I guess that's not fair because it's Asus. I'm sure sells way more laptops than they sell enthusiast motherboards at this point.
100%. Yeah.
By several orders of magnitude probably. Yes. But it's interesting because it's a thing that like I haven't been to a PC trade show since Computex shut down in like 2019. 1999 or 2000, right?
I mean, it's fun. Like I love it, and that's. I mean, I love Computex for a number of reasons, but being there specifically just for everyone to celebrate the PC is awesome. Like whether you are in laptops or DIY desktops, even the server grade stuff, like everyone's there for computing and rah. Yes. Hardware is amazing, which is definitely different than the CES. CES is like all tech. And while there is a lot of PC stuff that we cover at CES, none of it is on any show floor. It's like all meetings, and we're going from like meeting to meeting, where Computex is really the only trade show or that you can go on a show floor and just see PC stuff. So that is definitely like a huge difference that I love. One of the reasons why I love Computex.
Yeah. At CES, the PC stuff always felt like a little bit of it's not an afterthought because that's not exactly fair, but like they'd be like, oh, by the way, when you asked to see PC stuff, they acted the people who were doing booth tours or whatever were always like, oh, well, let me go find somebody. I don't know who you talked to about that because we were the first people who asked about that, right?
Oh wow, okay, yeah.
Or you were in some like far away end of the convention hall where like you had to go to the West Hall and then go upstairs to the very far back, and then there'd be like Ace Tech would be back there with a bunch of all-in-one coolers that they were selling to other OEMs, not even to consumers. So
that's funny. Well, yeah, like I actually had a personal goal of mine to never go to the Las Vegas Convention Center during CES because we never had to. So I've been going to CES since 2016. And there's only been one time that I've ever set foot in Las Vegas Convention Center proper, because that's not where the PC stuff is. Like Las Vegas Convention Center with the 3 huge halls, like we said earlier, it's all refrigerators and TVs and, you know, more consumer based stuff. They've now expanded also, or I mean, not now, but a number of years ago, they expanded out into what used to be called the Sands Expo. Now it's the Venetian Expo Center. And that is usually more like smart home or biohacking, you know, like smartwatches and like fitness kind of stuff. Yeah. So like that's kind of the show floor for that stuff. And then most of the PC vendors, whether it's desktop or laptop, usually have meeting rooms at the Sands meeting. There's like an offshoot off to the side of the show floor that's just like all meeting rooms. So there's a lot going on there for damn sure, but not like Computex. Computex, you just get to show up and look around and be amazed by the spectacle.
Well, and it's also the place that like case manufacturers come, right? So like,
oh yes,
for your enthusiast PC builder, which I think is of interest to the TechPod audience, probably. Like you have your Fractals and your Leon Lees and your Cooler Masters all are set up with their new hotness for the next year, and you get to kind of see the future of what cases look like, right?
Yeah, well, and we have a couple of new people on our team. This was their first time going to a Computex, and a lot of them joked. They were like, "Oh my god, everyone has a cooler. Who doesn't make a cooler?" Like, because a lot of these vendors, you know, that specialize in something else, also were like, "Oh yeah, we also have either an AIO or some air tower cooler."
Yeah, all I can figure is the margins on AIOs must be real good.
Right. Well, hey, Zalman still had a booth there. They were showing off, you know, new stuff, but they still had their typical, you know, copper. What was the name of that like just kind of like fanned out CPU?
Oh, the onion thing.
Yeah. Like I don't know how to describe it, but it's a classic Zalman PC or CPU cooler.
Well, they were always doing low profile and like really efficient air coolers. Like they often would come out of Computex in the old days with like, hey, we built a case that's completely passively cooled. No fans needed it. And you had some like crazy heat pipe thing that went from the CPU up onto the case. And then the case had a bunch of like aluminum radiator fins on it. So so the whole thing would just get kind of warm. Nice. I don't think it would work in the modern era, unfortunately.
I actually know that there were some manufacturers who were, I would say, one of the spectacles at a lot of these booths to get people in, regardless of whether they were looking for that company's specific product or not, was a lot of these booths had hired people to do case mods. So like we didn't do one this year, but last year we actually did like a big roundup of all the case mods that we saw that were cool. So like there was a lot of cool stuff to be had there. Like last year, somebody had built a computer inside of one of the alien eggs.
Oh wow!
Which was and then had like dry ice coming out of the top kind of thing. Or it was case mods. Like I am not into case mods myself because I'm not inclined to work on things like that. But yeah, like there's definitely a lot of cool people that do cool stuff, and you walk by and you're like, oh my god, that's a computer. That's pretty awesome.
Like the attention to spectacle, and like there used to be, I don't know if they still do this, but I think this was Gordon's theory, was that case manufacturers especially would gin up something that would be impossible to manufacture. They would show off at Computex just as a red herring, so everybody else would try to knock it off, and then the tooling costs would run them out of business theoretically, cause speed bumps for each other chasing impossible to manufacture products. And I mean, I think that used to be the case, but now I think we're good enough at manufacturing that there's not really a whole lot that's impossible to manufacture anymore.
Yeah, and I would say at least since I've been going to CES and Computex and these kind of trade shows, the last company that would do spectacle just for spectacle's sake was like Razer. Like usually they would come to a CES and have some sort of like design that they were like, kind of cagey about whether this was going to come out or not. But it was like the thing of like, oh my God, did you see what Razer made? But even they've kind of fallen by the wayside on that. We don't really see that too much anymore of like just really like, going crazy with something design wise.
Yeah, I remember Razer brought a proto Steam Deck thing like 12 years ago, 13 years, a long time ago.
Wow.
To CES. And it was like it was a slab computer with two handles on the side that had their kind of crappy controllers sticks on it. And they were like, look, yeah, you can play games on this thing. And then I think that shipped. I'd have to go look. I don't even remember. But it was it feels, I don't know. I'm interested. So who's not there? Like, are Dell and HP and the big American PC vendors there?
I mean, this is definitely a place for trade shows companies that are Asian based to kind of like show off. And there's a lot of like, just to be frank, still like traditions that are not as accepted in the US. Like, actually, there are still a lot of booth babes. There's a lot of like big flower arrangements that companies will get at their booths. As like, oh, hey, congratulations of what you showed off at the booth. So, some of it is definitely cultural in a lot of Asian based companies. Most major manufacturers are there in some sort. Like I said, like Intel, AMD, NVIDIA didn't have their own booth, but they definitely had a presence there. There were a couple companies, like, actually, now that I think about it, Razer doesn't go to Computex. So there are definitely some companies that just don't show up for Computex. And I don't know if that's because they don't sell in those markets, in Asian markets, or I think they just, I mean, especially in today's age, a lot of these companies have been like, we can put on our own event and not have to worry about going to a big trade show. Yeah. So there is some of that.
And Razer is less B2B and more consumer product, right? It's not like you're selling your Razer gaming laptop into your Fortune 500 company, probably.
True. Yeah. So I would say for the most part, I mean, representation is pretty big. Now, I will say there are some companies that don't exhibit at the show proper, right? Kind of like E3. And I know we keep coming back to that analogy, but yeah, like at some point, EA peeled away from E3 proper. They still put on an event at the same time as E3, but it wasn't actually part of E3. Same thing kind of happens here. There are a lot of companies who are like, we don't want to pay for, a booth on the show floor or something like that. So we're having our own event. Like, we went to Fractal Design, which makes a lot of popular cases. And they had an event like on the 88th floor of the Taipei 101 this year. So they weren't at the show. I mean, but they were at the show. So yeah.
What are those events like? Like at CES, those events are often like, hey, we're going to have a CEO stand up and talk for like 5 minutes, and then there'll be hors d'oeuvres, and you could take pictures of the hardware, maybe talk to engineers if you're really lucky. Or is it the same kind of vibes, or is it?
I would say it is mostly tailored for people to come in and get content. For the most part, like I went to an NZXT appointment, and NZXT had everything from their cases to their new fans to, they actually had a historical thing because NZXT hit 20 years. So they had old NZXT cases like on a timeline kind of thing, which was pretty cool. So usually they kind of know that the audience is there to get, or at least the media are there to get information, and to either make videos like us, or write articles, get photos, all that kind of stuff. Fractal was actually the only event or briefing that I went to that actually had us sit down in chairs, and they had a PowerPoint presentation on the projector. That's always the worst, just to be honest. Nothing against Fractal. I love Fractal. But I've been to plenty of those kind of events where like you're up on your feet all day, you have limited sleep, and then they sit you down to do a PowerPoint presentation, and inevitably somebody starts snoring. Not to be rude, it's just everybody's tired. So a lot of times that is kind of like, oh, please don't do that. Just bring us in and, kind of show the stuff.
Well, like if you have tangible things to touch, it's always better to handle, like, let us handle the hardware. I want to see the hardware.
Oh, yes.
and actually get it, be able to touch it and open it up and look at it and poke at it if that's possible. And
Definitely.
it's the reason you come to the event. Like, you could have looked at a presentation on a Zoom.
Yeah, and especially for desktop DIY desktop builders, like it is important to kind of get your hands on something and feel what it's going to be like to, maybe potentially build with it. And that's a lot of the way that we cover our stuff is like, hey, what's announced, what are the key facts about it, how does it feel initially to kind of build in. Unfortunately, like a lot of things, I mean, companies, maybe they announced a product, it doesn't come out till fall, so all they have are engineering samples, so you're still kind of taking some things with a grain of salt. And I mean, kind of like at E3, you show up to a game demo and you're like, well, the game's not final, so there could be bugs. So that even happens in this space too. For sure. So it's definitely interesting, but usually pretty representative of what like final products are going to be like. Very rarely is something behind a case or like a glass case and you're like, you can't touch it. Except for, I will say this year, Intel put their new Lunar Lake laptops behind glass and didn't let anybody touch them. They announced it. And they had laptops at booths, but they were all behind glass, which was very odd.
Was that so people couldn't like get hands on and run benchmarks on them, you think? Or was it something?
I heard from multiple vendors that, yes, that was a problem with Meteor Lake, their previous launch, is that people were getting kind of pulling it off to the side, running a quick benchmark and gathering some information based off of, pre-release drivers and pre-release hardware kind of stuff. And then coming to a conclusion and, kind of thing. And so Intel was very much like, we don't want that this time. But then on the other side, that's kind of a bummer for us because we couldn't get our hands on the hardware. We couldn't get any sort of viable information of like, okay, this is what it feels like to use. So it's a double-edged sword, right? Every company kind of has their own different way to do it. Usually they err on the side of, hey, here's what we're showing and here's what you can mess with. But this year, Intel was a little more cagey.
Well, it means if like a laptop vendor does something novel with their design, with their physical design, you're not going to get the opportunity to handle it, which stinks.
Well, and I mean, a good example is I love handhelds. Like that's definitely one of my coverage zones at PC World. Handheld PC
like
gaming,
Steam Deck,
Ally,
Steam Deck,
ROG
kind of
Ally,
gaming.
all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So the MSI Claw, they announced a new version, an 8-inch version called the Claw 8 AI Plus, because they figured out a way to put AI in the computer, which is fun.
Thank goodness.
Who would have thought?
How many tops?
Have AI in the computer?
48, 50, 52. What are we talking about here?
Well, so it was a Lunar Lake based design. So they were like, hey, we can't wait to show you this new handheld. But I literally couldn't even put it in my hand to feel how the handheld, was just like, is it comfortable? Is it heavy? Like what are the ergonomics?
How do the sticks feel?
Exactly. Yeah. Because Lunar Lake was inside and because Intel asked, all the vendors to have Lunar Lake behind glass. So that was definitely a real big bummer.
You mentioned this a minute ago, and I want to circle back. I love when a vendor has either like, hey, here are all of our, here's a timeline of our products through the ages. I remember Cooler Master did a case layout once where they had like, hey, here's our first aluminum case up to the modern stuff. My all-time favorite of that is when Valve launched the Vive at GDC in 2015, I think. They had all of their hardware prototypes. They had an example of each of the hardware prototypes, and they were all just laid out so you could see the entire run up from, hey, here's a thing with cameras that relies on fiducials on the wall to track your position in space, all the way up through shipping product on the end. And it was really cool to see like, hey, this is a thing we've been working on for a long time. Like it highlighted how much work goes into making that kind of any kind of a product of any kind of complexity. Which
I love that too. Yeah, I do think some companies are probably like scared to show off some of that stuff, either because of proprietary knowledge, or maybe they are worried people will get the wrong idea. But I really do like when like prototyping stuff is shown off. The only example I can think of for prototyping stuff at this show was Zotac announced their new handheld PC called the Zotac Zone. And so they actually had like 3D printed models of different like hand shapes and that kind of stuff to be like, hey, here's where we're thinking about ergonomics. And I really do like hearing the backstory of a lot of that stuff.
Well, as somebody who used to make videos on this, it makes it really easy to make those videos, right? Because you can sit there and you can walk with the PM and let them tell the story and have they can show and tell it through through the different iterations and what they learned, and it ends up being a much more interesting video than just our product is running a lunar lake, blah blah blah, at this speed, and we have this many. Our display is this many nits bright, and it has this resolution, and you can go up to 90 frames a sec. It's always good to be able to show rather than tell. So
definitely, I'll say one of the other things that I love about Computex. I mean, this applies to any trade show, but for Computex specifically, usually by like day 2 or 3 of the trade show floor being open, because by that point we've already been there for like a week, because stuff always happens beforehand. But at some point you start to see like these like trends, like, oh wow, that's interesting. There's like a new trend that's kind of forming. And I this year specifically, I did a video on Cam 2, which is a new low profile memory spec that is meant for laptop, but we actually had some PC vendors, desktop PC vendors, who were experimenting with that design on motherboards. And so like it was not something that was like a big splash, but like I started noticing like, that's weird. Asus, MSI, a couple other vendors, they're starting to experiment with this, and it was mostly like kind of in the corner. And so I did kind of I interviewed all of them, asked why they're doing it, all the PMs and stuff like that, and then kind of made a video based off of my findings on that. So I really do love like seeing like trends that kind of evolve, and like something that could potentially be a thing in the future, or who knows, maybe it's a flash in the pan and it never comes to fruition.
Well, the to see a step further, I think this is one of those things that last year was the rear connectors, right?
Definitely.
For motherboards. So
definitely. Yeah.
Last year, MSI and Asus and Gigabyte, was that the other one? Had
Gigabyte started the spec, and then Asus and MSI kind of developed their own.
For people who don't know, they have motherboard designs and cases that work with them that put the ATX power connector and your CPU accessory power and all the other stuff, and it plugs into the backside of the motherboard, so you don't have to run cables around the front. You can just jam on the back and then hide your shame.
I love it. I've done, we covered it extensively at last year's Computex. Now that some of the products are on market, I've definitely covered them there. Yeah, I mean, you actually helped me do a video on the channel with the a Corsair 2500X, I think was the name of the case. I can't remember.
That was one of their designs that they like ported over, basically an old case design for the new mother. They put the holes in the motherboard tray that line up with the motherboards. But
and I actually didn't do a follow. Like I was actually planning on doing a follow-up video for, hey, backside connector, trends came out of Computex last year. Where do we sit with it in Computex a year later? We ran out of time just because there's so much to do, so I didn't get to do it. But there's definitely a lot of movement in that space, even though it's like not as brand new shiny object like it was last year.
The thing I meant to ask you about is if they're going to start doing that on ITX boards, because that seems like the place where really you could use the ease of plugging in your cables is on a small form factors.
Actually, that's a good question. I would say yes, there's been talk, but now that I think about it, I can't think of an ITX specific board that was shown off. Usually it's full ATX or micro ATX. I think one of the issues, though, is that a lot of times the ITX space right now is defaulting to sandwich style layouts. So I think the concern is, in that kind of case, then you're actually running into problems. So yeah, I think that's probably why we're not seeing a ton of movement in the ITX space specifically. But I mean, doesn't mean you can't, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so. Like anything else you want? Like, I want to talk about the other stuff, because like part of going to the big trade show is always, hey, depending on how you feel about Vegas, oh man, I got to go be in Vegas for 10 days, or oh God, I got to go be in Vegas for 10 days.
No, I'm on that camp.
Yeah, it's like I have a 48-hour hard limit on the amount of time I want to be in Vegas, and the more days I go past that, the less I ever want to go back to Vegas again.
Yeah, I've been to Vegas too many times in my life, and most of them have been trying to do serious work. And Vegas is not a place to do serious work.
Yeah, so. No. When we were doing tested CES stuff real hard and bringing like 8 or 10 people, we would do my days. A short day was 18 hours. Like if I got 5 hours of sleep, I was really stoked.
Yeah.
So,
Same.
So like Vegas is not like sleep deprived and having fun. Vegas is one thing, but sleep deprived and trying to work for 18 or 20 hours a day, Vegas is no good.
And I don't know if you guys ever ran into this, but going from meeting to meeting, sometimes you're actually literally going from like a hotel or a casino to different hotel. And I'm primarily on the video crew. I'm the head of video production, but I used to just start off as a shooter editor, so I'd always be carrying around a video camera. And every trip, there'd always be a handful of people who would stop me as I'm trying to rush to my next appointment. And they'd be like drunkenly like, hey, take my photo. Don't you want to take a photo of me? And I'm like, no, I'm trying to get to work.
Yeah.
So get out of my way, please.
The thing that always killed me was the cab lines in Vegas, because like there's no public transit. The cab lines were sometimes an hour and a half long. So our big innovation kind of like Uber wasn't any better because traffic was bad. Our big innovation at Tested was our office manager came with us and she drove a van. So she would just ferry people around all day.
Nice. From
one stop to the other. And like we were able to get a lot more work done as a result of having easy access to transportation. And it like didn't cost a whole lot. And she got to come to Vegas and have a couple of really nice dinners. So she was excited. Yeah.
Well, luckily at Computex, most of the things are centralized around the convention center, which I appreciate. So and then the nice. Rest of it is usually around the Taipei 101 area. But yeah, no, I mean, like any other trade show, we usually show up about 3 days before the actual show floor opens, because we're taking a lot of pre-brief meetings, preparing content, that will hit some sort of embargo during announcements, maybe attending the actual like keynotes, and then the show floor proper opens, and then doing a bunch of coverage like from the show floor as well. So it's usually a trade show for us is about a week's time of covering. So
well. And the jet lag is gnarly to going to Taiwan from even the West Coast. So,
I didn't get hit going there. I got hit way harder coming back. So which in the past, I never had to do this, but a couple of people on my team had to make that trek going from Computex to immediately covering E3. So literally flying from Taiwan to LA to cover E3, and the jet lag would hit him, and it was horrible. I'm so glad I never had to deal with that, because
it sounds like hell. So you mostly stay in the convention center area when you're there?
No, we usually stay at for most of the work. Yeah, it's like in the meetings or around the convention center, but some of the companies will do it at their headquarters, because a lot of them are based in Taiwan. Like Asus has a really large headquarters, MSI, Cooler Master, NVIDIA has an office there too, AMD. So there's definitely appointments that we go to specific vendors for, but for the most part, everybody has some sort of something around the actual convention center.
And do you get to do like fab tours and stuff like that ever, since all that stuff is there too, or is that in a different part of the island?
So TSMC, which is the largest fab in the world right now, it supposedly doesn't do a lot of press related tours, so we've never looked into it, and that's kind of the only one that's within spitting distance of Taipei, which that's where Computex is specifically in Taipei. We did do some vendor specific tours. Like last year, Gordon and I went out even a little bit earlier, and we actually did a tour of the MSI offices specifically around designing laptops. So it was actually a really fun video. I can send you a link if you want to put it in the show notes or something. But
show notes.
We essentially got to talk to key people of the laptop design team. we couldn't see manufacturing because the actual physical manufacturing was in mainland China. So we didn't tour that. But I mean, we talked to the audience development team. We talked to the actual design team. We talked to MSI is one of the only companies that has in-house rapid prototyping for like a case, the shells for laptops. So they can like easily concept something and then kind of send it down to be printed to get kind of like a look of what it looks like physically. They do some initial like thermal testing. They do have a very small anechoic chamber there. So we got to experience that. That was a really fun video to put together. Cool. I would love to do more stuff like that. Another person who does awesome tours like that is Steve over at Gamers Nexus, a friend of both of our shows. And he's really good at kind of going to these companies and kind of doing tours based off of what they can show.
Yeah, it's always hard. Like anytime you're in a factory, we did a couple of car. We tried to do a couple of car things once, and like the list of, hey, you can show this, but if this is anywhere in the shot, you can't use that shot. And like I have to imagine that a chip fab where it's everything's secret is a nightmare to shoot in. So
yeah, that we have been invited to specific Intel fab tours. Like the last one that we got invited to, I didn't end up going. My coworker Mark Hockman was in Malaysia. They had a fab tour in Israel 2 years ago, I think it was. They have a fab in Ireland. So I would love to go on one of these fab tours in the future for sure. But yeah, it is exactly what you were saying. Like there's certain parts where you're like, well, you just can't shoot here. Sorry, we're just going to give you the information. Or if you shoot here, like you're going to have to be very careful of what you're showing. Maybe blur something out.
But my favorite note ever was when I asked if you can go into the paint room of an automotive place, and they were like, well, you could, but you have to not have any cosmetics on, because if you have any deodorant or hair product or makeup or perfume or cologne or anything like that, it can impact the paint. It can impact the curing of the paint as it goes on the panels as they come through. And I was like, so what? The guys who work here don't wear deodorant? And like, no, they have a list, so they can buy these specific brands and these flavors of the brands and stuff like that. I was like, that is nuts.
Okay, that is nuts. Yeah, that's crazy.
Okay, so I think last thing, we got to talk about night markets, because night markets, night markets came up a lot in the Gordon and I watched all the keynotes together, and like night markets came up a surprising amount during even the keynotes. What's up with night markets, Adam?
Well, I mean, it is very integrated in a lot of Asian cultures, but specifically Taiwan, has these key night markets all over Taiwan. But in Taipei, there's some specific ones that are very key. And somebody had shared, I guess there was like a Twitter account or something that was like posting which night markets Jensen from NVIDIA was like attending. Just like, I don't know who. Like I guess it's the equivalent of like inside gossip for people who follow large tech CEOs. I don't know. I don't really follow, but it is definitely a thing of like, oh man, this CEO appeared at this night market. That this night market's going to get a bunch of boom. I don't know.
So for people who don't know, night markets, basically they once it gets dark, like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, it seems like they shut down streets. Okay.
No, earlier than that, more like 6, I think, is like the earliest one that maybe we went to. And it depends. A lot of them are actually markets that are just designated that. Like instead of like shutting down a street at a certain time, it's like, no, this little alleyway is pretty much always blocked off. And because it's not just, a lot of times it's not just about like food vendors coming up and setting stalls. A lot of times there's a bunch of businesses that are selling, tchotchkes and off brand Gucci bags to people. So like in each one of them, and this year, so I actually went a week early with my wife to do a personal vacation. So I was able to go to more night markets than I could during like a trade show, which was nice. And so I think I went to like a total of 6 different night markets this last trip.
Oh, cool.
And each one of them really does have a distinct like focus. and like vibe to it. It's really cool to do them kind of back to back. I mean, a lot of things are, I mean, there's a lot of food, there's a lot of shopping. A lot of the food can be similar to traditional Taiwanese stuff, but some of them are like, oh, if you're going to go to this night market, then this specific dish is specific to this night market, or oh, you really want to get the one over here. There's actually a night market. I'm going to butcher the Mandarin because I'm practicing though, but Ningjia night market is more for like foodies. I guess where you get like the really good food stalls, and there's way less of vendor stalls like selling stuff. So the focus there is food. And then another one I went to, I can't remember the name of it, but that one like had way more like vendors, and the stalls were kind of in the middle, but really the appeal was all the shopping off to the sides.
So what's the food sitch? Is it like, are we talking about like dumplings and dim sum kind of stuff, or is it noodles, or is it really
everything? I mean, you see a lot of the same things. Like there's always some sort of like fruit stands, and usually a lot of times there's multiple across the whole market. You see a lot of like a traditional Taiwanese snack is a deep fried sweet potato ball. So it's very like airy, almost like an eclair kind of thing. So you just get a bag of those and you're just popping them while you're walking around. So you'll see a lot of the same kind of things. But then, yeah, like I said, some of them will be like, oh, we went to this one night market that had this guy who had corn on the cob, and he like would like lather it up with something, and he had these series of holes that he would put them in for different times and different lengths, and I couldn't quite tell what he was doing with them, but it took like 15 minutes, and then he like gave this hot corn on a stick that looked amazing. I actually didn't get one, but my coworker got one. But yeah, and then some of it's really good. And then some of it is oddities for people from Western cultures. Like the two major ones are like stinky tofu and durian. And yeah, I don't want to be too mean to people who do love stinky tofu, but oh man, like I remember the very first time I smelled it, and it was not a pleasant experience for me. I thought there was like an open sewage somewhere, and my instinct in my body was telling me, dude, you need to run. Something is wrong. And then I looked over to the side and I was like, oh no, that's stinky tofu.
What's this? It smells like open sewage? That seems like
so
I've never had stinky tofu. It's not really something that comes up here that often, it turns out.
Yeah, no. I mean, there are places in the Bay that you can get it. I might put together like a big group of us to go try it or something. But
okay.
It is fermented. Usually it's like some sort of, fermented concoction with tofu, fried tofu, at least at the night market vendors, is usually fried tofu with some like cabbage and, fermented vegetables and stuff like that. I luckily, I am somebody who will try almost anything once. And so I actually have tried stinky tofu twice, despite what my inner body was telling me to not do it. This past year, though, I had a mission to try durian, which, fresh durian, it has a reputation to be very rancid smelling, to the point where a lot of like, you'll see signs up at like airports of like, hey, don't bring durian on planes, or hotels will be like, don't bring durian back to your hotel room. Things like that, just because it's so pungent. And it is mostly something that you can only get in Asian countries like Singapore, Taiwan, places like that. You can get some durian here in the States, but usually it's frozen when it comes over and supposedly loses a lot of its potency. But I did try it this year. We were at a night market. There was some fresh durian right there. And I was like, okay, cool. I actually shot a little video. I should post that somewhere, but
you should put it on your TikTok. Yeah,
I should. Yeah. And it was, I was prepared for the worst, because a lot of people, hyped it up as a bad reputation, but luckily it was nowhere near as bad as stinky tofu. So I was like, my first inclination was like, oh, this isn't that bad. I've had way worse. Like, I didn't like it. I didn't love it. I mean, I'd get it again just to try it again, I guess. So whatever. Okay. But yeah, like it was definitely not as bad as stinky tofu.
Like fermented stuff in general, it's funny. Different people like my wife is not a fermented food eater in general, and
Same.
And it's
I
hard.
hate fermented stuff. I actually don't like kimchi, anything like that. So I had a theory that the reason why stinky tofu hit me harder is because I just don't like fermented stuff. And so like I've asked random people around that I know of like, hey, what do you think of stinky tofu? Yes or no. Then if it's no, then I'm like, hey, do you actually like fermented stuff anyway? I would say this theory does not really hold water, because most of the time I haven't been able to see a trend, but
okay,
yeah.
Well, I mean, keep food scientists, let us know. Okay, the last thing on our night market list you have is capsule toys.
So I will say this isn't just a night market thing. This is literally like everywhere across Taipei. You literally can't throw a stone without hitting multiple 7-Elevens or other convenience stores, and almost all of them always have some sort of capsule toy machines out front.
Are you talking about like the thing that you put like 50 cents in and you turn the knob and then a little plastic capsule with a toy in it falls out?
Yes, and it is highly addicting for me. And I have spent each trip probably around $100 on capsule toys.
Oh my God, don't play loot box games, dude.
I know. Well, Clash Royale still gets me. The first time, like I kept all of them in their actual capsule, because then I did like some videos when I brought it back home and like opened it up with my wife. And so like half my suitcase, if the TSA were to open it up, they'd be like, what the hell is this? These are literally all just capsules. What? This is weird shit, dude.
Most 99% of them are toys, 1% drugs.
Yeah. Oh, you got to get through them to figure out which.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's fun. Like it's always like they're just novelty and they're fun. And like I love cats, and a lot of times they're like weird cat based like little figurines, and I'm like, okay, well that's a cat sitting on a toilet. That's hilarious.
That's
like,
pretty funny.
I have to buy it. Yeah. And then I bring it home, and sometimes I display them, sometimes I don't.
Do you have a shelf full of cats sitting on toilets that now you have to dust? So congratulations.
Well, and the trend I got this year was capsule toys of capsule toy machines.
Oh, wow. That's so very meta.
Yeah, literal machines that like are capsule toy machines that have little capsule balls. You twist a little thing and it pops out.
What? Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
There's different kinds too. And like we got capsule toys of like vending machines as well, and like literally the vending machines have like sodas the size of like super tiny. Yeah.
Well, this is the thing. My daughter got into this briefly because she used it when playing with like dolls. But there's these things called mini brands here.
Oh my God, yes.
That are the same idea, like really small.
Same thing.
Like yeah. I wonder.
I know this is not a video podcast, but I'm showing you. So
you're holding up two what looks like capsule machines. The focus is locked on your face pretty good, but it's okay.
Well, this white one is a capsule machine, and yeah, you can literally hit the button and a little capsule pops out.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it goes in the drawer, and then this one is a little vending machine. It's like an orange vending machine that has like little
jelly
juices.
Drinks. Are jelly drinks popular there?
You load the little drink in the back, you hit the button, and then it comes out of the bottom.
That's amazing.
It is so tiny. I've actually lost one of them. Oh, and I almost did it again.
Well, that one's in the keys now. It's gone forever.
So look how tiny this is.
It's like a pill. It's smaller than a pill.
Dude, smaller than a pill. Yeah. This is definitely not safe for children.
Yeah, no, don't give those to kids. That's amazing. That sounds really fun though.
Too fun, too addicting. I love it.
Out of curiosity, how like those are fancy, like capsule toys when I was a kid were like a thing of caps or something. What does a capsule toy machine cost?
So yeah, they're usually either 5 10 pieces or 2 to 3 50-cent pieces. Which like so the rough translation right now is 100 new Taiwan dollars is $3 American. So, if you use 2 50-cent pieces, it's like $3. A lot of them, actually, some of them even go up to like 5 50-cent pieces. So that's essentially like, you just plopped. I don't know. I'm not good at math. That's like $7 on one.
So if I'm just to have a point of comparison, like what is a like a lunch cost at a fast lunch someplace cost, not at a convention center?
Oh, like in Taiwan?
Yeah, in Taiwan.
That's the thing, is that, dude, like food there is dirt cheap. You can get like an amazing meal for like nothing. And it's hard for us because we're in the Bay, and like, you know, one sandwich can be like $20, but they're like the same sandwich is probably like 50 cents. It's maybe I'm exaggerating, but it's like you can get a lot of food for real cheap. That's just another reason why I like Taiwan. So
okay, well, this all sounds good. Thank you, Adam, so much for coming by and you know, sharing a little bit of what Computex is like. It sounds I've got to go sometime. It sounds fun. Oh yeah, you definitely should. Yeah, thanks for having me. Love hanging out. I'm always honored to be on the show. I listen every week. So well, thanks, Adam. And if people want to find out more, I think the PC World YouTube channel probably is the place to go. PC World YouTube channel, PCWorld.com, and I have started a PC World TikTok for anybody inclined. But you know, we're still experimenting over there. Well, and if you want a PC enthusiast focused podcast every Tuesday, the Full Nerd, more or less every Tuesday, the Full Nerd lands over on YouTube and where podcasts are found. Yeah, the Full Nerd podcast, and Will, you're on pretty often, especially recently. And yeah, we stream it live on YouTube every Tuesday. It's got its own YouTube channel now, youtube.com/@ the Full Nerd podcast. Thank you so much for coming by, and we'll talk to you soon. Damn good time. Be sure to check out PC World for more great work from Adam. Thanks as always for coming by. And that will do it for us this week. As always, Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod is brought to you by listeners. We're 100% listener supported. Without you all, we would not be here doing the show every week. So thank you to everyone who supports the show. If you want to find out how to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/techpod. Again, that's patreon.com/techpod, and where for $5 a month, you get access to the patron exclusive episode that we do every single month. I think this month's is going to be a live tech call-in show. So if you have tech questions, it may have already happened, but hit the Discord and we'll have information on how to join in and answer questions. And then the audio version will go up later on the patron only feed. But yeah, you can go to patreon.com/techpod and sign up to support the show. As always, thank you to all of our patrons, but a very special thank you goes to our executive producer tier patrons, including Andrew Slosky, Bunny Fiend, Paddle Creek Games, makers of Fractured Veil, David Allen, James Kamek, Joel Krauska, Jordan Lippett, Pantheon, makers of the HS3 high-speed 3D printer, and Twinkle Twinkie. And since it's the end of the month, we owe thanks to our associate producer patrons as well, including Alejandro Navarro, Andre M. Burke, Andrew Dicey Scholdice, Arthur Gies, Ben Tallman, Brutal Kerfuffle, Eric Klein, Felix Kramer, Graham Banks, Jad Rita, Just Associate Wedge, Matt Walker, Walkman 8080, close parentheses, Mike Etheridge, Nathan Phelps, Sanchit Kumar, Steve Lynn, Thomas Shea, and Tom Hilton. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate all your support. And if you can't support the Patreon, don't worry about it. Just leave a nice review of the podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we appreciate everybody who listens to the show every week with us. Thank you all so much, and we will be back next week with another edition of the Tech Pod. See you then.